Welcome, one and all, to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you are having a great start to your week. I can tell you one thing on my end. It is good to have my voice back. Still not 100%, but we are getting there. And as always, good to be with my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. It's awesome when it comes to talking Braves baseball right now. I know that it's not the most opportune time when it comes to how the season is going, but 9 games now the Braves have won in a row. 11-5 victory over the Nationals. The offense once again on fire. Ronald Acuna Jr. went deep. Michael Harris had a great game. Drake Baldwin had another good game. Just a lot of awesome things to talk about. But yet, it's the same story, rinse, wash, repeat, that we've seen over the past year plus. Just as soon as you really start to feel good about the on-field product of the Braves, some unfortunate injury occurs that takes the headlines, and that once again, of course, is the case. Again, my name's Shawn Coleman, Hammer Territory, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. As always, my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert, is with me. And Stephen, that's where we are once again. The unfortunate news, Ozzie Albies for the second straight season. I'm not exactly sure if it's the exact same injury, but during tonight's game, when he went to the plate, took a swing, it was revealed that he broke the hamate bone in the same wrist where he had a broken bone last year. It may or may not have been the same injury. It's a significant injury to the same wrist, and just an absolutely unfortunate into the season for Ozzie Albies, who here recently just cannot buy a break when it comes to avoiding injuries.
Yeah, what's up, buddy? So it is wild that every time the Braves get on any sort of like positive run, they catch an injury. They catch like a serious injury by somebody. And I know obviously the season was winding down, and Ozzie had been a lot better lately. I had a lot of people, we were talking about this on Twitter when it happened, like what is going on with Ozzie's like hand, wrist, and there was a lot of conversation about it. And one thing you got to remember with Ozzie is, one, the way he holds the knob of the bat, it's his kind of hand is kind of off of it. And so that knob of the bat kind of digs into his hand a little bit. The way he holds the knob of the bat, and especially obviously on it's his left hand. So on his right hand swing, it's his bottom hand. On his left hand swing, it's his top hand. But on that right-handed swing, there's just a lot of torque and a lot of pressure on those bones right there. And he already swings an incredibly heavy bat. We've talked about that a lot, that Ozzie swings one of the heaviest bats in the game. He's not a big dude, but power is a big part of his game. So, he uses a heavy bat to kind of make up for the fact that he's not the biggest guy in the world. But yeah, it's just, I think he is somebody who's just very clearly naturally susceptible to this, where he's just going to deal with hand and wrist injuries. Just, again, the size of the bat he swings, the way he swings it, the way he holds it. This was a non-contact injury. This was just on a swing. I think he was a swing and a miss, if I remember correctly. He didn't make contact with the ball. He just swung and broke a bone in his hand. And that's concerning, because it just seems like it's something that he's going to have to constantly deal with. If you get hit by a pitch, it's just bad luck, but it's not something you're worried about like continuing to happen. But when it's a non-contact injury, and it's very clearly by the way you hold and swing the bat, it's a different level of concern, because now you're wondering, like, can it keep happening? And we've seen with Ozzie, it usually has a pretty strong lingering effect. The recovery for this is only like 8 weeks. And so he'll be ready for spring training. Like, that's not the concern. The concern is, for him specifically, there always seems to be a lengthy period of time where this injury zaps him of his power, and it lingers for quite a while. And so now you're just kind of left with this question of, like, what is even if he's going to be healthy come spring training, what does his offensive production look like? Which was already sort of a question because of what we went through this year, specifically in the first half as he was recovering from his last wrist injury. So it's just more questions.
It absolutely is. And we'll start with Ozzie because, we're going to get, in this episode, we're going to discuss what it means for Ozzie in a couple of different perspectives, but also the ripple effect for the rest of the roster, because this now does impact, how the offseason priorities are, without a doubt. But let's start with Ozzie. And we'll start with the fact that for Ozzie, At some point in time, I feel that Ozzie is a wonderful human, wonderful player, but I don't care how good of a person you are, how mentally strong you are, things such as that. Ozzie seems even keeled no matter what. I would be very surprised if at some point this does not take some mental toll on Ozzie as well. Because you have to remember, this is starting to pile up injuries. 2020, he missed more than half of the 60-game season. 2022, he missed, nearly 100 games. Last year, he missed over 60 games. It was due to foot injuries. Last year was due to the wrist injury. And I know that he's played nearly every game this year, but now this wrist injury occurs again. It's significant injuries piling up on significant injuries. And I obviously think that Ozzie will at some point in time overcome this. But as we mentioned, there's a difference between this injury healing to the point to where he can play and Ozzie being to the level that this Braves team clearly needs for him to be, which is at least being at around 100 WRC plus level type of player. And he can certainly be that. He's been at about 110 WRC plus over the past 5 weeks, and you see the impact that it's had on the offense. But that's the big thing when it comes to Ozzie, Stephen, is that do I feel like that he could get back eventually at some point in time and be in the all-star level of Ozzie that we've seen over the past 5 weeks? Yes. But can the Braves take on the risk of it taking him several months to get back to that level next year? That's where the big question lies. And the likelihood of us seeing in 26 what we saw from him in the first half of 25, it just exponentially increased because of the type of impact this sort of injury has on his approach at the plate to be productive. Even if he's healed, even if he gets mentally back to where he needs to be, fully trusting his swing every single pitch that he sees, that's going to take a while because we've already witnessed the fact that it takes a while.
Yeah, so let's just kind of lay it out here. So obviously, Ozzie, for people who have been following all year or just are Braves fans and know this, Ozzie, the guaranteed portion of Ozzie's contract is up after this year. After this year, it starts the team options that were tacked on to the end of his deal. So next year, Ozzie has a team option for $7 million. And of course, the critical part of that, what we've talked about many times, and we'll talk about again, is that he's got a $4 million buyout attached to it. So even if you decline it, you're only saving $3 million because you got to pay this $4 million buyout. And the way Ozzie looked in the first half, there was real conversation like, can we do this again? Because he looked awful. Like, some of it is profile based because Ozzie, power is such a big part of Ozzie's game because he's never been a high on base guy. And when you're not a high on base guy, you have to slug. Otherwise, you got nothing. You got nothing to build on. This is the Michael Harris problem. So if you're not slugging, you got a problem. And for the first 3.5 months, Ozzie wasn't slugging. And there was all these conversations about like, is it risk? Is it because it's just lingering issues from the wrist? Well, in the second half, he started slugging more. He started looking more like himself. But now we have another wrist injury or, hand, wrist, whatever. So that's going to be the concern going into next year. I still think the option gets picked up because again, it's such small savings. You're saving $3 million for a guy who's beloved in the clubhouse. Your star player, Ronald Acuna Jr. is like best friends with this guy. So I'm still not to the point where I think they're going to decline the option, but there are now real concerns of like what you're going to get from him next year. And, do they bring in a utility guy that can play second base? Do they trust Nacho Alvarez to be that guy? How much protection do they give themselves against Ozzie not being himself next year? Assuming they pick up the option, which again, I think they will. And I think you do as well. How much of a safety net do they give themselves on the roster with another utility player, maybe like a super utility player, somebody who's closer to a starter level player than a bench level player? There are things you can do on the roster to protect yourself a little bit, even if you do pick up the option. It's just one more question, and the Braves already had the Braves already had enough questions this offseason. They did not need is another injury to the wrist hand of Ozzie Albies to now throw into question, his ability to hit for power, which is such a massive part of his profile. Like they didn't need that. And so, that's why tonight sucked. But yeah, what did they do with the option? Again, we think it's going to get picked up. And then what do they do with the roster to protect themselves against Ozzie not being himself going into next year?
And I'm in full agreement with you. I think there's no question that they pick up the option, what he means to the club. With Ozzie, I think that some may not put value on this, but with Ozzie, I do think that you put value on it more than others. What he's meant to the squad, both on and off the field, the clubhouse, impact that he has, the fact that he's best friends with your most pivotal player in Ronald Acuna Jr. Listen, that matters. Those intangible aspects of Ozzie matter, and they should matter. And that alone is a reason why I think you pick up an option. The other thing, though, that I want to make clear is that we're talking about the worst case scenario. What if Ozzie has this linger once again and he becomes, again, one of the least productive offensive second basemen in the game for much of next season, like we saw this season? We know the Braves really cannot handle that. But I also want to point out that say he does get fully healthy once again, and maybe next year he is back to producing like he is right now. And Ozzie Albies, who over a 5 or 6 week stretch next year is producing the 110 WRC plus, especially if we're trying to win from the second base position, that is more than worth, the $3 million or so in savings. It's the equivalent of the $7 million that they'll pay him next year. So it's not like it's going to take much for him to earn his contract. That's another reason why I think it's worth picking up the option. As much as we want to talk about potential worst case scenarios and how this potentially has a negative effect on Ozzie in the offseason, there still is a realistic outcome where he could come back sooner than he did this year, come back sooner next year and be productive. So that's why I think they're going to pick up the option. And that's why I don't think they're going to do anything other than continue with him as the primary second baseman for much of next season. It's just what you do with that insurance policy. It's what you do with the second base depth, because you've already been through the worst case scenario of if he's not productive. You saw how big of an impact you had that in 25. You really can't go through it again in 26.
Yeah. And listen, they have Nacho, and Nacho has certainly um I think Nacho has certainly increased his value this year versus where it was when the year started. I think he is now seen by probably the team and certainly a lot of fans as a perfectly suitable utility infield player who can play second, who can play third, probably can play shortstop in a pinch. You don't want to do it for a long term. But again, he's probably more of a bench level player. Do you need to go get more of a closer to a starting level player now that you have these concerns? And we're going to talk about Kim and shortstop in a minute. Now that you have these concerns with Ozzie, do you upgrade maybe your utility position? Do you go get a Willie Castro type player who could reasonably start on a lot of teams, but at the very least can be insurance? Listen, it's a fair question. And the other thing you have to consider if you're Alex, again, is this something that you're worried about continuing to happen with Ozzie and the hand and the wrist? Again, the way he holds the bat, the way he swings the bat, the size of bat that he uses, like that's all stuff you have to consider. Like this might not be the last time this happens to him, because again, it was a non-contact swing. It's an injury that is now, I don't know if it's the exact same injury as last year, but it is close enough to the same injury last year where you are concerned that this is something that's going to continue to happen to him. So, those are just things Alex is going to have to consider. And so, yeah, it's just another question that they didn't need. But I do think, again, to kind of wrap up Ozzie, I think they're going to pick up the option. I think he'll be the starting second baseman next year. I do wonder if they increase the level of insurance they have on the roster at that position to maybe close to a starting level player on the bench to be insurance for Ozzie in case we get another 2025 where he just doesn't look like he can hit for a large chunk of the season like happened this year.
Absolutely. And, we talk about these questions. We've talked about, questions, the same type of question being there, even if it's asked in a different way for over a year plus, or more questions rising than answers as time goes on. I definitely think that this raises more questions. But one question that we do know the answer to, The Braves cannot afford to go into next season with there being a big chance that they once again have league worst production up the middle when you come to center field, shortstop, and second base. More on how this Ozzie injury impacts the roster as a whole, especially up the middle when it comes to the Braves position players. More on that in just a moment after a word from our partners.
Football is back, and so is your shot at big wins. With DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, your game day instincts can score you real money fast. Here's the play. Just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, or break out rookies to elite QBs, and unlock the upside that every snap brings. The better your calls, the bigger your payout. And here's the kickoff bonus. New DraftKings customers get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry on your first pick set. This season, play your player instincts. Download DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code FOUL. That's code FOUL. Play just $5, get $50 in Pick 6 bonus picks. Make the call. Ride the upside in partnership with DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
So, Stephen, I think that it's best to kind of sum up how when you take this Ozzie injury, you look at it, how it impacts the offseason, and basically how the ripple effect makes the impact of this injury go beyond second base. I think a couple of numbers really put it into perspective. In the first half of the season, the Braves were 11 games under 500. After tonight's win in the second half of the season, the Braves are now 2 games above 500. So there's been a 13-game swing between the end of the first half and where they are in the second half. Like, that's how big of a swing they've had. That's how much of an improvement. And I know that this recent winning streak is a big reason why. You can point to a lot of different factors, but for me, here's a big factor. In the first half of the season, when you combine production from the Braves' center field, shortstop, and second base position, when you combine that together, the Braves had a 58 WRC plus in the first half of the season, 29th in the majors. The only team that was worse was the Rockies at a 54 WRC plus. The team in the 28th position had a 74 WRC plus. So the Braves were very bad. 58 WRC plus from those 3 positions combined in the first half. In the second half, the Braves have simply been league average, a 97 WRC plus from center field, shortstop, and second base combined. But you see that leads to more of a 10-game positive swing in the record. That's how much production, that's how valuable just having league average production from those 3 positions is. And the thing is that as of 24 hours ago, you had to feel pretty confident that with an Ozzie being close back to his self, maybe Ha-Seong Kim being our long-term answer at shortstop, and though Michael Harris has fallen off once again, showing what he showed, back in August, you had to feel pretty good that league average production could be a decent expectation from those 3 positions in 2026. But now we're back to having that concern where that's now potentially back to being a question. But that's the whole thing. The difference between league worst production in those 3 positions and league average production in those 3 positions, that's the difference between the Braves being a playoff team and a lottery team. You've got to have league average production combined from those positions, and that now is a much bigger question than many of us will be comfortable with going into the offseason.
Yeah, so it starts with Kim in terms of the questions, because there's just this player option hanging out there that we've talked about. We've talked about a bunch, obviously, the night that he got claimed. And, a lot of us were hoping that the Braves might be able to work out an extension right after the deal to kind of get rid of this. Obviously, Scott Boras is the agent, so that was going to, obviously he's not going to love that when he's got a chance to get back on the open market. And since then, Ha-Seong Kim has been awesome. And, I remember we did the show and I kind of talked about this, about the problem with player options is that you are tied entirely to the downside of the contract, but you only have access to a limited amount of the upside of the contract, because if the guy gets really hot, goes nuclear, he's going to decline the option. He's going to hit the free agent market and you might lose him. And I'm not sure Kim has gone nuclear, but he's been really, really good. I mean, he's got like a 130 WRC plus as a shortstop, which is incredible production from that spot. Again, his agent is Scott Boras. The odds that he's going to decline this player option and hit the open market have increased a bunch, quite frankly. They just have. I know Braves fans don't want to hear that. And there's a chance he could still pick up the option. There's a chance the Braves could work out an entirely different contract, an extension of some sort, where he gets a lot of guaranteed money, gets a higher AAV or something. But this close to free agency, again, with Scott Boras as your agent, I wouldn't count on that. And so I am very worried they're going to lose Kim. I know he loves Atlanta, but if he gets to the open market, the odds that the Braves are the highest bidder are not usually great. So I am officially worried they're going to lose Kim. And then you have this whole question at shortstop, which we had all year until Kim got here. Now you add in the injury to Ozzie Albies at second. Michael Harris has fallen back off the wagon after that incredible month stretch where he was the best player in baseball. He's been honestly just as bad as he was in the first half since then, over about a month. So yeah, you're right. Now you're back to these questions at those three positions. It would make things so much easier if Kim could be retained. And I know that's not entirely up to Alex. This is why player options are such a headache to deal with, because he just doesn't have any leverage or control here. Bringing Kim back would make things so much easier. If that doesn't happen, it's going to get fascinating because, like you said, you already got questions with Michael next year. You already got questions with Ozzie next year. If you don't bring Kim back and you have questions at shortstop next year, I mean, I just don't know if you can go into next year having those three spots being such offensive questions like they were this year, because we saw what it cost the Braves, and you brought the numbers up. Like, it cost the Braves quite a bit. Some of that was guys at the top of the lineup too, of course. It wasn't just those guys, but having at least league average production for those guys is a big deal. And it would just make things so much easier if they could work out a deal and get Kim locked back in for next year and the next couple of years. That would just make everything so much easier.
And the reason why it's so important to retain Kim is because of his consistency.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we're talking about league average position or league average production, like, it doesn't even need to be that. Just like a 650 to 700 OPS month in and month out from center field, from second base, from shortstop. We're not needing Michael Harris. It'd be great if he did it, but the Braves don't absolutely need for him to have an 1100 OPS over half the season. That's unrealistic to expect. It's just that we don't need for him to go through a 3-week stretch where he has a 200-300 OPS and then go through a week or two where he has 1,000 OPS. We need that consistent 650 to 700 OPS from at least two of those three positions, and it would work wonders for this offense. It would work wonders for this roster, and that's why it's so important for us to retain Kim, because that's what he can provide. The consistency of him putting together good at-bats would be such a big boost for the bottom of this lineup or middle of the lineup, wherever he's going to bat, and just filling that shortstop position. Now, with that being said, we'll have all offseason to discuss this. I think, and I want to make it clear, when Steven's talking about that player option potentially being declined now, that is something Boras is absolutely going to angle for. This Ozzie Albies injury is the type of development that really Boras looks for. I'm not saying that he's hoping players get injured, but he's the type of agent, as we all know, who's going to work every angle possible to get as big of a contract for the players that he represents as he can. And for the Braves now, the need to retain Kim has just gone up. That makes him more expensive. 3 years, $55 million, 4 years, $75 million. That's not an unrealistic ask for Ha-Seong Kim this offseason, and some team is going to pay it. It may be the Braves, but you can bet some team is going to be willing to pay that, and that's the reason why the player option is probably going to be declined now, in my opinion, because there's also not a lot of great shortstop options over the next 2 years. So retaining Kim just became more difficult. But the other portion of this that we need to discuss in terms of how do we approach roster building this offseason to counteract what's occurred, you need a reliable utility guy. You need someone. We talked about the fact that you really don't need that DH position, solely a DH option that you can't play in the field filled up. So you can play some of your fielders in that DH position every day, a different person at the DH position every day. But now you probably need a guy who you can feel just as comfortable playing at second base as you can left field. There are plenty of options out there that could do that. That probably could get you that 650 to 700 OPS, at least at that type of position. That type of guy, especially a controllable option, I think would be a great addition for this squad. That's what you need to find. One source that potentially could fill multiple needs for this squad, like we had hoped Jurickson Profar would do, and he has done when we signed him last offseason.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that utility infield position is now substantially more important. But listen, if you don't resign Kim, you also got to find a shortstop. Like, you can't do Nick Allen. I don't think you can do Nick Allen. Nick Allen's a great defender, but he's literally one of the worst hitters I've ever seen. And, Vidal Brujan, Luke Williams, like the Braves love these, defensive shortstops that run, OPSs that look like a pitcher. I just don't think you can do that. You got to go find a shortstop. And there is not a lot out there this offseason. There's Bo Bichette, who some people aren't even sure is going to be a shortstop in the next couple of years. He's certainly not a great one. And there's Kim, assuming he declines his option. Again, we don't know that. I do want to make sure we say that. It is possible, although unlikely, it is possible he picks up that player option. It's also possible the Braves work out a contract. At this point, I certainly would say the likeliest thing is that he declines and gets to the market, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But if they don't get Kim back, they're going to have to find a shortstop somewhere. And it's damn near the hardest position in the field to go find elsewhere. And they don't really have anybody up and coming. I know they just drafted a bunch of shortstops, but those guys are 3 years, 4 years away. So they're going to have to figure out shortstop one way or the other. It would be a hell of a lot easier just to get Kim back. I in the strongest possible terms, I hope Kim is a number one priority of this offseason, or even before the offseason starts. Get Kim back to this team should be that should be the mantra. That should be the motto of everything the Braves put out over the next 3 weeks. Get Ha-Seong Kim back on this team next year, and everything else becomes a hell of a lot easier. If you don't get Kim back, it becomes substantially more difficult. And now, especially with this Ozzie injury, the bottom of the lineup already has questions because of Ozzie and Michael. You do not want to have to add shortstop to that. Bring Ha-Seong Kim back.
Yeah, and other big names like a Bo Bichette or a Gleyber Torres or trading for a Ketel Marte, those just are not as straightforward of a option that just helps your roster in multiple ways, like re-signing Ha-Seong Kim is. Because Kim's already here. You've already got that relationship established. You just have to pay him money, though it's money you may not necessarily want to pay. You just have to pay him money to be able to fill the shortstop position adequately to above average defensive wise, plus what he could do with the bat. Torres and Bichette nor Marte are going to be reliable defenders at shortstop. I'm not saying that Kim is a better player than Marte, for instance, but it doesn't make sense, really, in my opinion, to trade what you have to trade to get Marte, pay him what you're going to have to pay him, plus you still got to pay Ozzie Albies. That does not make sense.
Marte's a second baseman. Gleyber Torres is a second baseman. That doesn't help you at short.
No, it doesn't. That's why re-signing or retaining Ha-Seong Kim is so important. And I think that's the reason why Alex Anthopoulos realizes this. I think Alex Anthopoulos is banking on how good of a fit Ha-Seong Kim has been here so far, and I think that he will be willing to pay. When I mentioned that 3-year $55 to $60, 4 years $75 to $80 million price tag that Ha-Seong Kim could ask for this offseason, I don't think it's out of the realm that AA, when he claimed Kim, he could see that being a possibility. So I think that that's run through his head, but I agree with you completely. As important as it is for Ozzie Albies to be healthy, it becomes even more important now for the Braves to retain Ha-Seong Kim, because it just allows for you to feel easier about so many other questions for this roster.
Yeah. And again, there's no one. I mean, there's I don't want to say no one else, because the trade market is always available and it's hard to predict what players are going to be available, but teams don't trade shortstops. They just don't. Guys that are close to being in the majors, because shortstops can move all over the field. There's just very little value and trading away somebody who could be a major league shortstop. And so teams don't do it. So, you got the free agent market. You have nothing internally that's coming up. Like, it's Kim. It's pretty much got to be Kim. And Boris knows that. And there are other teams out there that need shortstops. So, like, that's why I think the option's ultimately going to get declined, and he's going to let it go free agency where there can be a bidding war. Like, I think the Yankees have talked about getting rid of Volpe. I think the Red Sox, I know they have Marcelo Meyer, but there's talk about Trevor Story. If the Red Sox need a shortstop, there's actually plenty of shortstop is just the hardest position to find. And the Braves have a really good one right now. Got to figure out a way to keep him. Even if you have to overpay a little bit, even if it's not a contract you love, I don't care. Like, this is not the time to, use your analytical hat and it's got to be this precise number, or we're just not saying yes to it. Sometimes you got to say yes to a contract you don't love because you need the player. I think the Braves need Ha-Seong Kim. Even if it's a little more than they want to spend, you got to bring him back.
When we talk about organizational focus or organizational approach or things such as that, and we're talking about the fact that in some aspects that needs to change this offseason, this is one of those examples. Because however you've gone about approaching your up the middle production over the past 2 years, it absolutely has not worked out. Yes, a lot of it is on Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies, injuries, underperformance. All that plays a part in it, but they have occurred. You've experienced the worst case scenario of how your approach to this point has not worked out. That means that it's the time to change things or do something that you may feel uncomfortable doing. If that's overpaying for the consistency and the reliability that comes with the Ha-Seong Kim, do it, because that at least is a great starting point for the rest of the offseason to go by and make progress with. But that's not the only news of the day. We'll have plenty to discuss when it comes to Ozzie Albies and up-the-middle production as the offseason moves forward. Some other notable occurrences happened during the day, including an awesome opportunity for a farewell return for a beloved member of the Braves World Series squad and someone that many Braves fans have come to love over the years. Uncle Charlie is back.
Todd Father, you and me grew up in Jersey. We liked to collect cards, but the way the process got was ridiculous. You open up a pack. There's a bunch of cards you don't care about. Then you want to get certain ones graded. Takes forever, right? Then you want to maybe sell one. It's such a to-do. Arena Club has been the solution for us.
Arena Club has been a solution for everybody. You go online, go to Arena Club, and you check out what they have. Put a little cash down, and you might get one of the best cards that you've ever seen in your life, an autographed card. And guess what? If you don't like the card, easily you could sell it back and make a little cash. You never know what to expect. It's a cool way of doing it. You're going to get a surprise every time. And if you're into cards, this is something you really need to get into.
Right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/foul and use code FOUL, like Todd Father's talking about with those slab packs. Every pack is a grail. That's at least 20x the price of the pack. Check it out.
So that is true. We talk about, the Braves, how, in the Alex Anthopoulos era, he just loves his guys. He loves reunions with former players. Even if they've been with the Braves for a while during his era, they go somewhere else. He loves bringing them back, and that's exactly what we saw occur. Last Friday, the Braves faced off against Charlie Morton of the Tigers. The second time this year, the Braves had faced off against Charlie Morton. They did earlier this year against the Orioles. They had a very good offensive game plan. It worked out. Charlie, unfortunately, was designated for assignment by the Tigers on, I believe it was Sunday. Then it may have been Saturday. It was over the weekend. But the Tigers actually fully released Charlie, and that worked out because he is back with the Braves. Brian Snicker announced it on Monday during the pregame conversations. Now, the big question is, what does Charlie's role look like? At the very least, this could be just a farewell tour. He's back with the organization that he had some of his best years with and that he started with. That may be enough in itself, but of course, we'd love to see him on the mound again. But overall, just good to have Uncle Charlie back. If this is the end for Charlie Morton, it's great to see him ending it with the Braves.
Yeah, I could be wrong. This really feels like signing with the team that drafted you, signing with the team that you won a World Series with, maybe getting one more start to be able to say bye to the fan base and then retiring at the end of the year. Like, that's what this feels like to me. I mean, obviously the Braves are going nowhere. Charlie Morton was going nowhere. He got DFA'd and then he got outright released, which allowed the Braves to sign him for pennies on the dollar. If they had claimed him, and this is what Brad and Scott were talking about last night, if they had claimed him, then they would have been responsible for the last 2 weeks of his salary, which is actually quite a bit of money because he's making $15 million this year. But because the Tigers outright released him, the Braves could sign him for basically nothing. So this was a kind of a no, there was no risk, no cost. I think they just want to let a kind of a franchise legend. That might be too strong of a word, but I don't know if it is. People can debate that. I know he wasn't with the Braves a lot, but he did help the Braves win a World Series. And that alone matters in the history of the franchise. There's only, how many guys can say that? And Charlie was the ace of the staff the year they won the World Series. So, I know him and Max Fried were obviously the pivotal parts of that rotation that year. So I think they just want to say goodbye to him, let him say goodbye to the fans. I have no idea if he'll even pitch. I think he pitched on Friday in Detroit against the Braves. So he should be available to pitch anytime over the next week if they want him to, or if he wants to. He might not. This literally might just be like, sign him, has a retirement press conference, and that's it. So, I mean, hell, him and Snip might have a joint retirement press conference for all we know. But yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. I saw people freaking out about it. I don't really understand why. It didn't cost the Braves anything. They're not going anywhere. The season's over. They got a bunch of guys on the roster that are whatever. Like, I didn't care. It was funny for Brad. I think if he pitches, Brad's going to go to one of the games because Brad has been the Charlie Morton guy for all these years. But yeah, it was cool. And I hope I hope he at least comes out for maybe like an inning so the fan base can give him the ovation. And, that stuff's cool to me. But I'm guessing this is so he can retire as a Brave. That's what I'm guessing. I don't know that for sure, but otherwise I don't really understand why you would go through the motions for 1 week of the last week of the season.
I would give him the chance to end the year for the Braves. That's what I would do. With the fact that the Pirates are going to be the team that he's going to be facing. Of course, as many may remember back in 2009, Charlie Morton was the prize prospect that was traded from the Braves to the Pirates in exchange for outfielder Nate McLeod, who was having a breakout year. It didn't work out, obviously.
It did not work out.
It did not work out. He did. McLeod did not have a good career with the Braves. But then, Charlie went on to play with the Pirates. Let's see, he also played with the Astros, the Rays, the Orioles, and the Tigers, after the Braves. But the Pirates and Braves are who he spent 12 of his 18 years with. So him closing out the season, closing out potentially his career, again, it's the team that he spent the majority of his career with. I think that would be an outstanding development and a great way to end the season. Now, with Morton being back, if anybody had uproar, I don't think it was any way, shape, or form. That's nowhere justified for bringing Morton back. Bring Morton back all day long. Yeah, he deserves that. It's been outstanding. I think that the Braves bringing Morton back is a great gesture. What probably did confuse some folks is that Giancarlo Lara going back to the minors was the move that occurred to bring Charlie back. That didn't necessarily make much sense to me. In my opinion, it's been a missed opportunity to not see what Lara could offer to this squad, at least for a few weeks. But just bringing him up for a road trip for 3 games, that to me doesn't make a lot of sense. And that, I think, if there was any part of the moves today that kind of, got a side-eye glance of why, it would be that. Lara should have been up here weeks ago contributing to the squad to see if he could be an option for next year. And I think it's a missed opportunity that they've not taken advantage of that.
Well, and they had chances to pitch Lara. Like the game he came up on Friday, which is the game that Morton pitched, ironically. And the Braves won that game like 10-1. Like, why wouldn't you pitch him? Yeah, I didn't get that. I don't really understand what they've done with Lara this whole month. Like, I thought he would come up earlier. They finally bring him up the last, 10 days of the year, and then they don't use him, and then they send him down. It has been very weird. And I if you're upset about that part of it, that's perfectly fine. I don't understand that either. And once he's up on the roster, the first game he plays is a 10-1 game. It's a perfect game to get him in. And like even tonight, like if they'd kept him on the roster, it's been a perfect game. I don't know. Yeah, that part's been weird. Charlie coming back, I have no issue with whatsoever. But how they've handled Laura doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But they've done a lot of stuff this year that, quite frankly, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So
Yeah, agreed. I was just looking at some of the stats, where Charlie ranks in terms of, the since the Braves have been in Atlanta since 1966, basically over the past 60 years. And I wouldn't go as far as saying that he's been a top 10 pitcher in the Braves era in Atlanta, but I'm right there with you in terms of narrative and in terms of what he's done. And, we'll have more to talk about with Charlie, especially once if he does retire this offseason. But one thing that I do not think should be lost on folks, Charlie legitimately has been one of the most productive after the age of 35 pitchers in Major League Baseball history.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in terms of just, quality. He hasn't been like up to the level of a Scherzer or a Verlander or a Randy Johnson or somebody like that, but he legitimately has had some of his best years past 35 for the Braves, and I think that that's what really stands out. Not a Hall of Famer or anything like that, but he is more than made it clear that he was one of the better moves of the Alex Anthopoulos era in Atlanta.
yeah, I think it was. And franchise, I said franchise legend. That's too strong. He's not a franchise legend, but he did help the Braves win a World Series.
Yes.
But I think so. He went from Pittsburgh to Houston, and I think he was like 32 or 33 years old at that time. And in Pitt, he had not really done much at all. And then he went to Houston and really kind of turned into it a legitimate, like not ace level, but very, very good starter. Pitched on those really good Astros teams, and then went to Tampa and was like the ace of their staff for like 2 or 3 years. And all of this happened, like you said, I think he went to Houston at like 32 or 33. And so all of this has happened after 33 years old, or 32 years old. So that's been the incredible part, is he had this entire second half of his career that was substantially better than the first half, which is not how it normally goes in terms of aging curve. And so, yeah, good for him. And I'm happy the Braves brought him back. It does not matter to me whatsoever if he plays, if he pitches, if he gets lit up, if he, throws one pitch, maybe throws one inning. I don't care what they do, or if he just retires tomorrow. The season's over. The roster spots don't mean anything right now. I don't understand what they've done with Laura. That's a perfectly fair criticism of the team. But yeah, I have no problem with Morton coming back to finish his career. At least that's what I'm guessing is going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that stands out about Morton as well is that just the success he's had in the postseason. I mean, he was a huge part of the Astros 17 World Series run, as well as the Braves 21 World Series run. He also played a big part in Tampa's 2020 run, though he struggled in the World Series, but he's had plenty of big postseason moments as well. So just a stellar overall career. But again, we've got plenty of time to talk about that in the offseason. Do want to end on another note. We talk about some of these moves that the Braves have made in terms of bringing in guys, reclamation potential projects that could play a role in 2026 if the Braves were to figure them out. We've seen them add some bullpen arms like Tyler Kinley, Alexis Diaz, and today they also added Joel Payams. So maybe saying his last name wrong, but I think that's correct. Joel Payams. Now that name probably looks familiar because he was a part of the Sean Murphy, William Contreras trade. He went from the A's to the Brewers in that trade, and he actually was one of the bigger, he's probably the biggest surprise overall of that trade with how productive he was for the Brewers in 2023. Outstanding reliever in 2023. Since then, he struggled some in 2024, really fell off the cliff this year, so that's why he was made available. There's stuff there to work with, Steven. I don't necessarily know if it's just an absolute, hey, this guy could, it makes perfect sense for the Braves to claim him. He's a reclamation project that could really turn into a valuable guy in 26. It's going to take some work, but the outcome there could be stuff to still work with for him to potentially turn into a part of the bullpen in 26.
Yeah, I mean, 23, 24, he was striking out like between 9 and 10 guys per 9 innings. He was walking less than 3 guys per 9 innings. So like just those two numbers alone are attractive to a lot of teams. Like if you're a reliever that strikes a lot of people out, more than a guy per inning, and you don't walk a ton of people, there's a lot of teams that will give you a shot just based on that alone. And the Braves are one of the teams, by the way, that are very high on strikeout to walk ratio in terms of their pitchers and especially their relievers. That was what first attracted the Braves to Joe Jimenez from the Tigers. He wasn't a high leverage reliever for them, but he had these insane strikeout to walk numbers. And that's what, how do you say his last name again? I think you said it correctly.
Payamps.
Payamps. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's right. So that's what he brings to the table. Strikeouts, not a lot of walks. One thing though, he does not have minor league options for next. He is under team control next year. The Braves will have I think he goes to arbitration next year. I have to look that up, but he does not have any minor league options. So that's going to be, he's got to make the team outright, assuming he's I'm guessing he'll at least get a spring training invite, assuming the Braves don't release him in the offseason. But if he makes it all the way through the offseason on the roster, he'll get a spring training invite. He will have to win a job outright in spring because he can't be optioned. He'd have to be DFA'd. So just keep that in mind. But he is a guy that's got some stuff. He's had some major league success, high strikeouts, not a ton of walks. 2025 has not gone well for him, which is why he was available. So the Braves are kind of hoping they can find some of the magic he had the last couple of years.
Yeah, it really feels like that the contact success, the quality of contact opponents have had against him is once jumped up. I think he allowed like 6 or 7 hits per 9 inning in 23 and 24, jumped all the way up to 11 plus in 25. And that's just not going to work when you're a reliever. Plenty that we have discussed. Again, I guess for content purposes, it's nice to have things to discuss, but not this way. And I want to end on this note. It is gut-wrenching and just it's painful. It sucks to see someone who is as good a person, good just about representative for the Braves as Ozzie Albies has been over the past decade nearly, to go through these injuries. And I know that this is kind of something that he deals with, his playing style deals with, what have you. It just sucks to see Ozzie deal with this. Yes, there's a realistic possibility he can be right back to being normal 6 months from now, and we'll be good to go. No questions asked. All these concerns are by the wayside, but it's just that we've seen this already occur, and we've seen the downside of what happens. That's what we're concerned with, which I think is a legitimate concern to have. But all of what we think and all of how we feel and all of what we break down the side, I just want to see Ozzie Albies return to healthy, man. He deserves to be able to play the game that he loves, healthy and confident, just like Ronald Acuna Jr. does. And hopefully he'll get a stretch here over the next couple of years where he puts the injuries past him. He can get back to being the Ozzie Albies of old because he certainly deserves that. I know the Braves will benefit from it, but man, just hope Ozzie has speedy recovery and hope he's back better than ever as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I want to make the point one more time. We already made it earlier, but I can already see the comments. I can already see people on Twitter. A hamate fracture, the injury itself is not like some crazy injury. It's like a 6 to 8 week injury. Like it's not the injury itself. It is the lingering effects of the injury that we have already seen from Ozzie this year from his injury last year. That is the concern. It is not him. He will be recovered from this injury probably before the playoffs are over or shortly after the playoffs are over. That is not the concern. It's not, is he going to be healthy once the spring training starts? It is, what are the lingering effects of the wrist, the hand on his particular swing, the way he holds the bat? Does it have impact on his profile, which has to be power driven for him to be successful because he does not have a high on base percentage and never has. That is the concern. So I don't want to hear people like, you guys are so stupid. The hamate, it's a 6 week injury. I swear to God, we get that. That is not the concern we're talking about. We're talking about the lingering effects after that. So, and that's what the Braves are going to have to consider. So, and everything you just said is 100%. I want Ozzie more than anything. This guy just deserves like a healthy, give the man a healthy 2026, just so he can not have to work. I mean, he almost made it through 2025. At least physically healthy. I know he didn't have the year he wanted, but
he was ending it on a good note. He was showing he still had it when he was healthy.
Yeah. And he was far enough removed from last year's injury where you started seeing the power again. And again, that's the concern going into next year. How far past the injury are we going to have to get before we start seeing the production again? And so that's the concern. And so I don't want to read any comments about like the hamate boat's not that serious. It's more than just the injury itself.
because this also affects other players. This is a well-known specific injury that goes beyond just healing back to where a player is capable of playing. It's them being able to get their power back, them being able to have the trust of swinging at different pitches, them being able to know that they can fully go through their batting approach, their batting motion without that, concern being in the back of their mind. Am I going to feel that pain again? I'm not saying that it's going to be a mental case for Ozzie moving forward. It's just that it's impacted many of players who have had this injury. It's a very common injury because of how much rotation goes through your wrist on a consistent motion when you're swinging the bat. That's one thing. But again, like we talk about with Spencer Strider, him having to readjust himself with the fact that his fastball is not where it once was. With Ozzie, if he doesn't have that same, if he doesn't have the same potential in his wrist to help out with his power game, that completely doesn't necessarily throw off, but it just changed his approach to try to be successful.
Yeah.
It's the fact that it is such an important part of a position player's ability to hit for power that when you are a player like Ozzie, whose offensive production is so based, is so, it's so much of his offensive success is determined by how much he hits for power. Anything that gets in the way of him doing that, it becomes very significant if it limits his ability to hit for power. And that's why this exact injury is for Ozzie a bit more concerning than it is for others, because how much power plays in his game. And again, we've already seen how much it can impact his overall production from this year. We just hope that 2026 isn't a repeat of 25 and we get more of what we've seen over the past 6 weeks from Ozzie once he returns in 26.
Yeah. And again, like when you've had the same injury or close to the same injury, it becomes a mental, like you're afraid to swing the way you normally swing because you're like, am I going to hurt it again? Right. The way he holds the bat with the knob right on the hand, even if you're physically over the injury, there's a mental side of it too. So yeah, it's just another question the Braves didn't need. And now they have, and so now they've got, I don't know how much it's going to adjust their plans. But I know this, bringing back Ha-Seong Kim would help a lot. So let's start with that. Let's maybe go grab a utility player that can play second in case Ozzie's not the same. But you got to bring Kim back. That's my number one takeaway from all this.
And let's end this on a positive note. Let's see a significant Braves player hopefully coming back like his old self after experiencing the same exact injury that he already had a second time. Does this not sound familiar? Oh, it's Ozzie's best friend, Ronald Acuna Jr., who went through the same thing, coming back from an ACL injury for the second time of his career, and then he picked up right where he left off. Perhaps Ozzie having already been through this. He's got a good support channel for the Braves, and obviously Acuna being through something similar. Perhaps Ozzie comes back for this stronger than ever because he's already experienced it. But hey, enough speculation. It's an unfortunate injury. We hope Ozzie gets a speedy recovery and he's back and better than ever as soon as possible. But it also is important for the Braves to realize what they need to do to have as much guarantee going into 26 that they can get at least league average production or better up the middle when it comes to their position players. Steven, anything else from you as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
Last week of baseball for Braves fans, at least Braves baseball. Obviously, we're going to watch the playoffs, but for the season, it's the last week. It always goes by so fast, even when it was a miserable year at times for Braves fans. It's still sad when the season ends. Like, it's still kind of a bummer for me. The fact that we're in the last week, the last homestand, is kind of wild, actually. But yeah, it's been a fun year, even though it hasn't been the kind of year we wanted the Braves to have. The worst day talking about baseball is still better than most days. So we appreciate it. And we will be here to cover the offseason, anything that happens with Ozzie, with Snitker, with Morton. We will cover it all. It's a 12-month, 52-week-a-year podcast. So there it is.
And let's not forget, Ronald Acuna Jr. looks absolutely locked in. Matt Olson has been hot as can be. Drake Baldwin is getting back to the
offense. Looks good. Offense looks real good.
This Braves team now has an 83% winning percentage when they score 5 or more runs this year. 55-12 this year when they score 5 or more runs, and they've done it for 9 straight games and won all of them. In terms of on the field production, not a much better way that you can end the season. We get past these injuries. We've got some stuff to build on. Can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Hammer Territory podcast. Myself, Shawn Coleman at StatsSAC on Twitter/X, Stephen Tolbert at B_outliers on Twitter/X. Hammer Territory you can find across all forms of social media. Part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts you can find across all forms of social media as well. For Stephen Tolbert, Shawn Coleman, as always, a pleasure to be with you. Go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.